It was a year that shaped the future of man. 1961 was a year of international tensions, compounded by crisis after crisis.
My fellow Americans, I am about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
All discrimination did not end that day. But from that day forward, America has been a better and fairer country.
It can be a year of inspiration and hope.
Let us be united for peace.
That gift of freedom is actually the birthright of all humanity.
That we are too divided.
We the people, in order to form a more perfect union.
In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Civil disobedience.
The decision is ours.
I just want to be served at the lunch counter like everyone else.
Never have the nations of the world had so much to lose.
January 31st, 1961.
Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames.
Well, it was, those times were very scary times.
January 31st was the date that we had decided on.
Our freshman year at Friendship College, and it was decided that we would sit in and go to jail.
Americans of every race and color have worked to build a nation of widening opportunities.
They wanted to be treated as first-class citizens like everybody else.
We did have some members of the white community at that time who felt very strongly about the injustices which were occurring in the black community, and Brother David Boone and others who really stepped out front and provided some leadership, I think, for our entire community.
I see only one face, and that is the face of the future.
The fact of the matter that they had white and colored or water signs in most of the public buildings. Everything was segregated anyway, but that took it a step further.
And that one thing I couldn't realize, why could I not sit down at the lunch counter with other people?
It probably hit me maybe at the age of 17 or so. Prior to that, if you wanted something from the counter, you just stand at the counter and wait until the waitress would bring it to you, and you take it outside and eat it.
A lot of people that aren't familiar with it don't realize how far-reaching or deep-seated that is for both races, white and colored. Agitators, white and colored, want to change.
Tom Gaither had came on the campus that summer, and he was with the Congress of Racial Equality with CORE. He had just recently graduated from Claflin University in Orangeburg, and Tom Gaither was a South Carolinian. He's a Great Falls native.
That willingness to suffering, we had hoped that would appeal to the good-natured sense of social justice that we hoped permeated enough people in the country for some positive change to occur.
So we knew him. He'd come on the campus and he would sit in our ACP meetings, and this one particular day he came in and talked about a new strategy that we're going to try.
Because during that time, we were going to jail before, but we were not staying.
We weren't getting any satisfaction. We were not able to sit down at the lunch counters. So Tom brought this idea of jail, no bail, to Rock Hill. It hadn't been tried anywhere in the country, but an idea that thought it might work.
Jail, no bail.
We got involved in the jail, no bail policy with the Friendship 9. That was deliberate.
We were being bailed out. There was a lot of people going to jail and a lot of people paying fines. We were losing money. The NAACP were losing money, and other organizations was losing money.
And we just got tired of that and not being treated like citizens of the city. It just didn't make sense. And we figured it was time for us to do something about it.
So we came up with the strategy of going to jail and not paying the fine and staying in jail.
We had made up our mind enough was enough.
But we marched on. It's about a mile to downtown.
We were going to go downtown, march around town, eventually go inside of the diner.
We decided to go on in.
So we went in and we sat down.
We'd be served else.
The rules. Do show yourself friendly at the counter at all times.
But we decided, the 9 of us, 10 of us really, that we would sit at the lunch counters and we would not move.
We believe that since we buy books and paper in the other part of the store, we should be served in this part of the store.
And we proceeded to order.
And see what happens.
Do sit straight.
As soon as I sat on the stool, I was slammed to the floor by the officer.
Always face the counter.
I can only tell you what happened to me because I was on the floor.
Well, sure enough, the police came.
So we was snatched up from our seats.
Don't strike back or curse back if attacked.
And as I came up off the floor, 2 officers had me by the seat of my pants.
And they handcuffed us.
And marched out the rear door of the establishment.
And what else was that we ended up in York County, yeah.
Literally dragged us from the stools to the jailhouse.
And took us to jail.
And we were locked up right then.
Then had a hearing next morning.
Now, we didn't go to prison just to sit down and play around. We did hard labor. We did difficult things, moving concrete blocks. We did whatever they told us to do for 30 days.
They were well-trained to nonviolent and how important it was.
Don't hold conversation.
We had to learn how to behave in a nonviolent manner.
They want our money for the goods they sell, but they won't allow us to sit and eat at the lunch counter.
The young people now can't understand why did it happen, how on earth did it happen, why did they wait so long to do it? You know, if it was 150 years after Lincoln freedom, why did it take that long? And why didn't they do something about it?
Simply to be recognized that we sacrificed and they had no idea what we were doing. We could have been killed any moment. People were being lynched every day.
Because discrimination was occurring everywhere. And so only where there were those special individuals like the Friendship 9 who stepped forward did change begin to take place.
You know, we thought we were going to die that night. And oftentimes when we asked to go back there, it's not easy. So if I sound a little...
If you don't leave, I have to have a warrant issued for your arrest. You're trespassing. You're not welcome in the store, all right?
It gets hard.
From the White House in the office of the President of the United States, we present an address by Dwight D. Eisenhower.
As we peer into society's future, we, you and I, and our government must avoid the impulse to live only for today.
We must act today in order to preserve tomorrow.
Let both sides join in creating a new endeavor, not a new balance of power, but a new world of law, where the strong are just and the weak secure and the peace preserved. All this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin.
Americans can be hand in hand and work together, you know? A lot of people don't understand that racism, it is not inherited. It is taught. The older one is passing racism down. It's not in the blood. It is taught every day.
To continue this long trend, is to guarantee tremendous social, cultural, political, and economic upheavals.
Look beyond the stereotypes that blind us. We need each other. All of us, we need each other.
There were already movements, sit-ins all over anyway, but just happened just before the famous Freedom Ride. And I think this was a catalyst for that, the Freedom Ride, and eventually, of course, the Civil Rights Movement in '65.
Freedom train leaving on track 1961 and 1962.
The moment when the outcome of our revolution was most in doubt.
Ride, freedom riders, if you want to be free, ride on.
Father of our nation ordered these words be read to the people. Let it be told to the future world that in the depth of winter, when nothing but hope and virtue could survive, that the city and the country, alarmed at one common danger, came forth to meet it. America, in the face of our common dangers, in this winter of our hardship, let us remember these timeless words.
Freedom ain't freedom if a man ain't free.
With hope and virtue, let us brave once more the icy currents and endure what storms may come. Let it be said by our children's children that when we were tested, we refused to let this journey end, that we did not turn back nor did we falter. And with eyes fixed on the horizon and God's grace upon us, we carried forth that great gift of freedom and delivered it safely.
We'd like to think we played a role in it. I don't take credit for it, of course not. And it wasn't done for any fame or, to be honest with you, we had no idea it would be talking about this 54 years later.
That conscience was stirred by men and women who held sit-ins at lunch counters.
That it is our considered opinion that equal treatment of all persons without regard to race, color, or religion, or any other mark of class distinction should be encouraged. And that's a little bit of a light statement there, but it approaches what they ask us to do.
Well, most of us, well, probably all of us had pretty much the same type background where we had family members who were actively engaged in the church. And our focus was centered around the church. So we knew that there were certain things that we needed to do and other things we should avoid. And we wanted to make family proud. That was pretty much the case. And this was an opportunity, really, to take it to another level.
Not one ever come to me and said, I'm sorry. Now, I've had a couple of people say, white people come to me and say, I wish I stood beside you, back during that time. And I said, so do I. But no one ever stepped forward, so it was, that was the way it was those days.
Well, Brother David Boone, he was our Caucasian friend.
Brother David knew about me. I've known him all my life anyway. Brother David was at my wedding.
And soft-spoken, his mannerisms were super, just an impeccable man. Stayed right on the case.
I urge every American to join in this effort to bring justice and hope to all our people and to bring peace to our land.
A quiet and sober reassessment of our nation's character and purpose.
We, as Americans, have the capacity now, as we've had in the past, to do whatever needs to be done to preserve this last and greatest bastion of freedom.
I hope that every American, regardless of where he lives, will stop and examine his conscience about this and other related incidents. This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal. and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Today we are committed to a worldwide struggle to promote and protect the rights of all who wish to be free.
We have to face the fact that segregation is still with us. But I'm absolutely convinced that if democracy is to live, segregation must die.
Difficulties over segregation and discrimination exist in every city, in every state of the Union, producing in many cities a rising tide of discontent that threatens the public safety.
They see life as a long and desolate corridor with no exit sign. They become bitter. That is nothing more dangerous for any society than to develop a large segment of that society and leave them with the feeling that they have no stake in the society, that they have nothing to lose. These are the people who will not listen to the pleas of nonviolence. These are the people who will riot because they see no way out.
Counter sit-ins.
By that time, the picket movement had started already. Students who were freshmen at that time, were picketing the McCrory's and Woolworth 5 and dime stores.
Well, it started a year before when I was attending M.S. Scott High School. We were doing sit-ins at the time. And we were also demonstrating or picketing in front of the various eating establishments here in Rock Hill on Main Street.
Well, I didn't know what would actually happen, but I know we had made the decision to go and sit at the lunch counter. It hadn't been done before. People had, I think, sat at the lunch counter, and they were told to move, they moved right away.
Well, I think there was always a glaring example of discrimination when you want full participation, but yet when you look at full participation, it doesn't really mean full participation. It means buy our goods in a Woolworth or a 5 and dime, but don't have lunch at the counter. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
We could buy things, hot dogs, barbecue, whatever, but we had to take it in the back of the store to trespass, as I refer to it, and eat it. We couldn't eat it in the store.
You know, you spend money here, you can't spend it there. It just didn't make sense. And we figured it was time for us to do something about it.
I'm sure you often wonder why. And since there's an old adage that to get anything done, you must first define the problem, I'm going to inquire, what is the problem in this case? Some of you may answer, well, it's, of course, the Supreme Court decision of 1954. Power-hungry centralists trying to destroy the rights of the states. Still others will say that it's minority group pressure and infiltration of communism. To some extent, all those things are true.
In the early days of the picketing, there was some violence, but not on our side. We had some whites that throw rocks and eggs and bricks at us and stuff. So the police didn't intervene because they had to arrest somebody, them. So they didn't. And by us and being nonviolent, we were not arrested. No one fought back.
They realized the importance of what they were doing, and they knew that if they didn't succeed, it would set back the movement. And that's the last thing they wanted to do. They wanted to keep the movement going, and because they saw that sit-ins were not the answer anymore.
For a long time, a running battle has been going on among scientists concerning the race question. It can be put in a nutshell by saying that a cult has developed alongside the left-wing school of political thought, which tries to prove that environment is completely responsible for all differences between races, that nothing is due to inborn or inherited qualities. Now, obviously, if this could be proved, it would lend support to a variety of social programs.
People didn't really sit down at the table and talk about the issues, the frustrations they had of, picketing every day and not getting anywhere. It had to end.
18 years old. And I had no desire to get involved. However, this is going to be monumental. And I said, okay, let me think about it.
And that protest was really to occur 1 year after the first sit-ins, and it was to take us to a different level of commitment. And that's the essence of the jail, no bail.
Well, first of all, I didn't know what he meant by monumental. So I said, okay, so maybe I might do this. If I come, you'll know it.
That was the whole deal. Not necessarily, like I said, with the food, because that morning we really didn't want the food. I mean, I didn't taste the food prior to. I don't think we probably didn't have money in our pocket to pay for the food had we been served. Probably could have paid for it. We knew we were going to be served anyway, so we didn't have a lot of money in our pocket and probably couldn't have paid for it.
Actually, I didn't live in Rock Hill at that point in time, but I very much remember, as a community, how the community was responding to to various things that were going on throughout our country, and certainly all communities responded differently. But I do have distinct memories of those times.
Well, President Kennedy takes the Berlin crisis to the nation tonight. WKBW now zeroes in on the divided city of East and West Berlin. Late word from KB's Al Adel tells of communist authorities warning East Berliners that they'll lose their homes unless they give up their jobs in West Berlin. Just another attempt to close the door between Berlin and the free world.
It's the weatherman. Take the cue and tell us what the weather's going to do.
I was a busybody, only child, so I stayed in trouble. I was bothering somebody, chunking a rock at somebody, saying ugly things to them, preacher's kid too. And Brother David would always come and say, Dub, you gotta stop criticizing and hurting the feelings of others.
There's a man just died 2 years ago, Mr. Wilson, and he was a Klan member, and he quoted in the paper that I was the most hated white person in South Carolina, and but I never gave him a chance to catch me one-on-one or away from him. They certainly would not come into the black community to get me. I never answered the phone during those periods of time. That venom that they want to give, throw it. So.
That question is a question of individuality. It's a question that everyone has a different thought in that area. And it depends upon where one's life is or where one is in his own humanity. And it has a lot to do with religion, you see. And me as a youngster was not as close to God as I want to be now. So of course, my feelings then was much more of an anger of unacceptance of who I am.
The idea that all races are equal in their adaptability to our Western culture took root in America at Columbia University in the late 1920s. Available scientific knowledge provides no basis for believing that the groups of mankind differ in their innate capacity for intellectual and emotional development, end quote. Now, on the page directly opposite, we read, quote, It's possible, though not proved, that some types of innate capacity for intellectual and emotional responses are commoner in one group than another. We laymen will have to read the books on each side, understanding the background against which they're written, and make up our own minds where the truth lies.
It's very disturbing as just trying to figure out how other people were. But we thought it was something that we should do to make a difference. And that state of activities during the state of activities among the population, southern and northern at that time, and that something had to be done other than walking, marching around the shores, because we had to do something to show that we were not satisfied with just around the wall. We wanted to have the same privileges that others had.
We were being treated worse than first-class citizens.
And I constantly looked in my rearview mirror to see if anybody was following me, you know. And I breathed a sigh of relief once I drove into the driveway here, because I knew it was safe then.
Elsewhere in Washington, a Labor Department report to be released today will show a rise in the cost of living for the month of June. Remember where you heard that one first.
I was kind of in a good situation. Granddad was pastor of a church, and grandmom and my mom and 2 aunts and an uncle, and I was comfortable. And, you know, I could do pretty much as I pleased, and things were working out well for me. Just a few days before D-Day.
The training with the folks from Rock Hill was done at Claflin College.
After we were chosen to participate in the strategy sessions, first of all, you had to be not necessarily honor roll student, but a student could afford to be out of school for a month and let your grades suffer. So those of us did qualify. There were about 42 students who were in the sensitivity program. We had to slap each other, curse each other, spit on each other, say the N-word, whatever it took, because those are things that happen in real life down the street. So we had to be prepared to reenact just what would happen to us and how we would react to being slapped or being cursed out or whatever. By the evening of the 30th of January, there were 10 of us. Well, I took that back. There were 42, but 10 the next morning showed up. We'd expected 42 people, but 10 showed up.
Well, I felt fairly secure. And again, that religious background sort of undergirded who and what I am. And I felt that, you know, this is a cause that needs to be done, and I needed to be a part of it. At that point, I was convinced. And so I really didn't have a lot of fear.
CORE came in, really brought the jail no bail idea in, because we had SNCC and SCLCC had been into Rock Hill before. Jim Farmer had come through. Reverend Abernathy had been here. Martin King didn't get here until later on, but I think friendship was destined to be a part of it, if I may say that. But it just seemed the place to be at the right time. That's what I'm saying.
And the primary emphasis was on the sociodramas.
Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in.
Well, first of all, we ought to say that of all the movements, the demonstrations that happened in the early 60s, we're the only documented movement that we really was successful, as we call success, without any bloodshed, by being nonviolent. And this is when they coined the Friendship 9. That's why they did 9 people. I think the awareness that they gave the Afro-American, Jet, Ebony, all, I think this awareness did a lot to get people to come into the South.
And John Lewis, who is the representative from Atlanta, he got beat up in Rock Hill. And I went to the station with some of my guys to meet them when they came through, but you had no phone system, you know, like you do nowadays. And so I waited there probably for about an hour, and they never showed up, so we left. And they were something like 2 more hours late before they got there. And that's what, nobody was there in the black community to meet them, and so that's what happened.
Now, these college students who were just simply sitting at a lunch counter, they were arrested and they are in jail now, or they're on a road gang now. There's something wrong with me, and I'm talking about if someone were really interested in social justice or addressing the problems that we have in this country relative to race. So without doing anything active, at least the people in the other parts of the country could say, well, we're not going to patronize that store. I'm going to insist in my own personal life that we find a way to treat those young people fairly.
The situation would be bad enough if we had only to deal with these left-wing pseudoscientists. But we're faced with something else. Out of the scientific cloisters exudes a doctrine which seeps into the churches, into the press, into the movies, other mass media, until all the instruments for molding public opinion are corrupted.
We began to talk about it, and of the 9 of us, 4 of us went in the military. Right after the day after high school, we went on to James Wells and I went in the Air Force, went to McLeod, Massey, went in the Army. Oh, and Robert McCullough's deceased. Robert was Air Force, 3 of us. And they lied to us 54 years ago. But from the time we got on the plane in Charlotte and flew to basic training, we were haunted with that the whole time. It was made on the plane announcement. Any problem on this plane with you schoolboys, any problem at all, we're gonna have you arrested. By the time we got to San Antonio, they promised to keep us on the buddy plan in the same barracks and all that. As soon as we touched the ground, they separated the 3 of us. And I saw them again after basic training, 3 or 4 months later. And we promised to be stationed together with 2 of us. I went to Colorado, Wells went to Nebraska, Robert came back to South Carolina. And 3 years later, I went to Vietnam and Thailand. But I give the movement credit for this. It made me a man quick. When I got to basic training, I was ready. I had enough of hard labor and work and stuff to it. I mean, it was a breeze to me. By the time I got in the military, I was 20, and I've had the harassment, the mentally part of it, but no problem with the chain gang guards, the physical work. So basic training wasn't difficult for me. I think it would have been had I not had that experience. I was on the way about 140 pounds at that time, but it helped. And of course, all through my military career, we were threatened with whatever went down, our fault. I applied to go on leave during the march in Washington. Leave was approved. The day before they found out that, well, they knew, but they decided to enforce, I guess. Put me on KP, cancel my leave, so I couldn't go to the march. So that, again, was another slap in the face, so to speak. But it happened. We still remain nonviolent. I pulled KP, pulled potatoes, and watched it on TV.
And then after that, we went right into the school, integrated into schools. And so we had 7 people that really did it the first year and didn't have any trouble in schools, and then graduate more. And so finally, in 1970, they closed down the all-black school in town, high school, Emmett Scott, and the students, half of them had to go to Rock Hill High, and the other half went to Northwestern. Now, Northwestern was a new school just opening up. So everybody there were new to it, and so nobody had ownership of it. But Rocker High, which had been doing 30, 40 years, and it was their school, and they didn't appreciate him at all. And so they never really did anything really planning beforehand for it, you know, to work it in. So after the second year, in that basketball game, someone refused to stand up because they said that it doesn't represent them, the Star Spangled Banner. And so they got expelled from school. And so when the others heard it, they walked out of school.
If the Supreme Court of the United States suddenly handed down a decision that you could no longer worship your God in these United States as you saw fit, you can imagine the consternation, the chaos, the turmoil, the excitement that would create. Any decision to outlaw segregation in the southern states would amount to about the same thing in our area.
I got married in '65, and I was going to Wright Pat Air Force Base. I was going to become an officer. I was going to stay and do a career. By then, that's what I wanted to do. I came home, got married, and the first thing that hit me, I had reservations made 4 or 5 months in advance at a hotel here in Rock Hill. Only had one hotel, Holiday Inn. Night of my wedding, I went to check in, no reservation. I had reservation number, everything else. Signs in the window, vacancies, everything else, but they wouldn't give me the room. They knew who I was. By the time I got there, they had traced it. So I had to go to Chester County to another small county, get a little hotel for my wife and I. And I came back home when she was going to have her first child, 8 months. Her kidney failed. I came back to Rock Hill, full uniform. I was in the field in Saigon. They came and got me, the Red Cross, and brought me back to Rock Hill in uniform. I walked downtown Main Street, and the police stopped me. We're talking 5 years later, 4 years later. The sergeant that arrested me was the chief of police then. And he stopped me on the street, wanted to know what I'm doing back in town. That's my hometown, I can't come back down. So I'm home, my wife is expecting a baby in a minute. And where are you? I'm fighting a war for you. He didn't like that, because the way I said it, So they threatened to arrest me. I had to call my pastor and attorney to keep from being arrested, just for walking the street. That's just how, now, the act had been passed already, but yet still the mentality in this was very bad.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
I guess the best way to put it is wisdom. And a lot of people don't understand that wisdom comes from God. I'm not talking about man's wisdom. I'm talking about wisdom of acceptance. I'm talking about wisdom of appreciation. I'm talking about wisdom of being who you are. We have a misconcept of who we are because most people put the American dollar ahead of anything else, and that's the wrong concept of life. Life is accepting who you are, where you are, and your riches changes. You see, once you reach that stage of wisdom, what God gives you, then the acceptance of a dollar changes. It doesn't matter as much.
If you want to be faithful to the Founding Fathers, you won't ask whether you're going to win. That's not your affair. The fight is your affair. Do the best you can. I'll put it in the words of George Washington himself. Erect a standard to which the wise and honest can repair. The event is in the hands of God.
And I think, finally there's a recognition of that and the economics of it all.
That's just me. Now, everybody can't claim this because their acceptance of life is not the same.
I have a 91-year-old mother. She's still with us. And sometimes she called me aside and we talk about it, how she felt. But history is history, can't change that. You're going to cut that out, I hope, aren't you? I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
It just that when you repeat something over and over and over, it gets a little rough.
Yeah, I know it's hard to go back to those times back when we were.
In short, every American ought to have the right to be treated as he would wish to be treated, as one would wish his children to be treated.
It is time to heal America.
Always face the counter.
Any friends that I had on the other side of town, I lost them very quickly, and which weren't really true friends then.
I was clever about that because if Caucasians were around somewhere, I made sure that I kept it zipped.
I would see how cheerful they were in the black community. Once we crossed over into the white community, they're entirely different.
A cup of coffee, please.
Now, if you had African Americans there and I had center stage, I'd blow it up, okay?
Do show yourself friendly at the counter at all times.
And they very solemn and no joking around and or jiving around, as they would say, that.
So I was smart enough to know that on one side, I was going to have all of the glory and the fanfare. On the other side, I was just another chip.
Do sit straight and always face the counter.
But once we got back into the black community, they would just relax and enjoy life.
Don't strike back or curse back if attacked.
But once I concluded what was happening there, and once I decided that, okay, I don't want to be hated by folk, I want folk to love me, it changed.
I just want to be served at the lunch counter like everyone else.
Let me participate. We work together, that's all. Change of heart will change of mind.
And I saw that, and I said we had to do something about making that happen over Rock Hill, that just not in territories.
And so jail no bail would turn out to be an important commitment level that we had not seen before, which we would hope would appeal to people of goodwill.
If you are a deeply spiritual person, you would grab a hold of it and run with it. I wouldn't talk about it for probably 20, 25 years. The scars were so deep from the abuse that he took.
The fact that it was so civilized, because nowadays you don't hear about these calm, peaceful protests, because usually they end in just like riots and arrests and just craziness and people getting hurt.
He suddenly put up his hands and said, "Oh, you're not going to do that to me." Anybody who's been a Negro for long knows what that means.
The fact that they were able to go in peacefully and be above everything else, to me, is just that mentality is just amazing to me.
Our legacy is trying to correct a wrong.
I think what they did back in 1961 is very relevant for any marginalized group today.
Its purpose is not to divide, but to end divisions. Divisions which have lasted all too long.
Like with things that are happening now, there's people who deal with certain things differently. There's people rioting because they don't like things. And there's people protesting peacefully, like, don't shoot. And I think that's sort of like Friendship 9. It's a much better way of dealing with problems.
Sometimes the political complexion of a court does change. Sometimes it may be swayed by political pressures.
I believe that, anything worth fighting for, you never know what the end result is going to be. So even if I didn't change the course of history, it would eventually change the life of someone indirectly, or maybe even my life. So I believe if it's a strong enough cause that jail, if it has to go to that, then jail will be the answer.
Until we change the hearts of men, gotta change the hearts. We can change presidents, it can be black, blue, green, doesn't matter who's in the Congress, what's gonna happen next week. It's important, but it doesn't matter until your hearts change.
Take a leadership role, be genuine about it, and know the issues, study the issues, and be able to make decisions that would be most beneficial to the community that you're serving.
But when you're dealing with people, feelings, emotions, and livelihoods, once we stop lying and be honest about it and try to get on the same page, this would be a wonderful country again.
I see that person has feelings just like I do, and they don't want those feelings hurt or offended, and I try not to ever hurt anybody that way.
I cannot help thinking that 100 years from now, the historians will be calling this the generation of integration.
Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I believe we will win it because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with the destiny of America.
For our community-wide Martin Luther King celebration, I invited Congressman John Lewis to come. What he did was extremely moving to me because he sat at the counter and he put his hands on top of it and bowed his head and prayed.
It moved me to see people being willing just to show up, being brave and courageous.
We are a much different place. We are not fully where we need to be and want to be, but we're a much different community today.
It's a good country, but we could be a whole lot better. Yeah. Yeah, I'm proud to be American. I'm not going anywhere else. No, if it's for you, no, I'm not. I'll be right here. So you stuck with me. I'm sorry.
But we didn't think back. We just marched on what we thought was right.
We're here, I think, because our work isn't done yet.
The United States of America.
Freedom. That's what it should mean. If we can ever come together and really unite, it will really be some type of country. If we could really unite.
What in the hell are you doing here?
You have a good day, too.
Even though we have our problems, that it's the best country in this world. I believe that.
We have come a long, long way, but we still have a long, long way to go.
I'm a proud American. I'm even proud of Black American. But I'm American, and I'm proud to be one. I can't imagine myself being anything else.
The amazing thing about the Friendship 9 was that we took essentially a group of college students who had no knowledge at all of tactical nonviolence. And we pulled off one of the most important protest events of the movement. We were able to pull it off. Great.
Today, in far corners of distant continents, the ideals of those American patriots still shape the struggles of men who hunger for freedom.
Discrimination was occurring everywhere, and so only where there were those special individuals like the Friendship Nine who stepped forward did change begin to take place.
My mother used to call up, and she would, she didn't know I was in trouble. And she said, "Oh, thank God you're not in Mississippi." Not knowing that, the trouble was in Rocky, South Carolina too, but she was, I never told her, and she was, to her deathbed, she went relaxed and without any worries.
What if I never let our voices echo, never read between the line to paint a perfect picture, art deco, and just let go. Never sat metro, only stood where they told us to, like we were only meant to do. Live below, allow Jim Crow, living and walking like there's no soul. Kings and queens, we all behold, never forget it and never let go. No escrow, just us, so we march slow, stay hopeful. Repercussion don't matter, but you're sick of being battered. Never knew me like who is me. Never thought fluently like no one in the past influenced me. Kept my thoughts inside a box. Never fought, never thought, never taught, never walked, stood still, never sought. Was more than just a drifter. Watch her fall, never lift her. But I'm hearing them screaming and whisper. It's time to progress. This stuff is a mess. It's like they refuse to confess, but together we can, so let's. Never let our voices echo, never read between the line to paint a perfect picture, art deco, and just let go. Never sat metro, only stood where they told us to, like we were only meant to do. Live below, allow Jim Crow, living and walking like there's no soul. Kings and queens, we all behold, never forget it and never let go. No escrow, just us, so we march slow, stay hopeful. Repercussion don't matter, but you're sick of being battered. New dream, new plot, new scheme, new voices ready to ring. Past generation voices echo, still hearing them sing. Dorothy Heights, Rustin, John Lewis, Malcolm X and King. Friendship 9, intertwine minds and climb. Let it combine to define on the front line, cause I know that I'm legendary, necessary, black of the berry, mind military, far from ordinary, never solitary. Stand for nothing, fall for anything. Don't make me rise at any means. A right delayed is a right denied. Please, Lord, don't make me ride denied. Never forget, together let's lift. We can make anything shift when knowledge is lit. So let's not drift, aim and not miss. Think and uplift and live like we mean this.
It was the year that shaped the future of man. 1961 was a year of international tensions, compounded by crisis after crisis.